Now, I've seen a lot of tools come and go over the years, and this year is certainly no exception. Now, I've been testing out a bunch of the newest woodworking tools out on the market, and while many of them have turned out to be gimmicks, cheap knockoffs, or just blatant money grabs, a small handful have turned out to be some real game changers, and I think they're going to be huge. So if you want to get your hands on any of these awesome tools that I'm going to show you today, I do have links down in the description for you to check out, or for you TV viewers, just scan the QR code with the camera on your phone. All right, so let's get started. Now, if you've used a track saw, you know how awesome these are to have in the shop, especially for cutting down large sheets of plywood quickly and efficiently. But the problem comes when you're trying to make repeatable cuts for like shelves or parts of a cabinet. It takes time to measure out the panel you want, mark the line, then align the track to your marks. And you have to do that every single time you make a new cut. And this has to be done very carefully because if one of your marks are off a little bit, then you won't have a square panel. Now you could invest thousands of dollars into a precision industrial panel saw, or instead you can turn your track saw into a panel saw using the TSO parallel guide system. Two of these rails attach to your track saw, ensuring that you get repeatable, accurate parallel cuts every time. And this is perfect for breaking down big sheets of plywood for cabinets or furniture. Now, as an example, I cut out 3 pieces of plywood all to the exact same size using the parallel guide system. And as you can see, I never had to stop, take any measurements, make any marks. I just moved the guide rail over and make the next cut. And all 3 of these panels came out to the exact same size. Now this is great for batching out lots of panels for shaker doors or the sides for cabinets. Now I've been using the original Gen 1 version of the TSO parallel guide system for about a year now, and I've been really happy with it. But they just came out with a new second generation version, and it's got some really nice improvements that I think makes this system even better than the original. With the original system, the guide rails had to slide on the end of the track saw guide from the end, and you'd have to tighten them down with some Allen keys. And this would be a little bit cumbersome getting them in place, and if you ever needed to move them because of the size of the sheet you were working with, you had to find the Allen key, loosen up the screws, move the track, and then retighten them down again. Now the new Gen 2 system has these drop lock connectors. You just press the button and the guide rail slips on at an angle and drops right into place. Once it's engaged in the rail, the guides are locked in place at 90 degrees and they don't fall out whenever you lift the track up and reposition it. If you need to reposition the tracks, you just push the button in and they move easily side to side. And if you ever need to remove the guides rail system, all you do is push the button and lift it to remove it off the track. Now, another big change that I really appreciate is a completely redesigned flip stop. And when you look at these side by side, you can immediately see that the new design is much beefier than the original. You can use this with total confidence. This thing is not going to deflect at all while you're using it. Calibrating the new stop is much easier as well. It just has a single adjustment screw in the back instead of the 2 different screws on the original, which could get a bit finicky whenever you're trying to make an adjustment. But one thing I really like is the improved pointer for setting the measurements. Now, this old one is a little bit imprecise and you had to be right over the little arm to see exactly where your measurement was. Now, the new one, it has this machined slope on the end of it, and it comes to a point right on the scale. This makes it crystal clear where your measurement is set. But the best upgrade of all, the new Gen 2 guide rail system is universal, so it works with all the major track saw brands. That includes the Makita, the Festool, the Craig, Rigid, Win, Powermatic, and Milwaukee track saws. Now the guide rail system is available in 3 different sizes. You have the 20-inch set for small jobs, or you can get the 30 or the 50-inch for some larger projects. Now, you could purchase all 3 sets with the heads and the flip stops all ready to go. However, you can save some money if you just buy 1 set with the head and the flip stops, and then you can buy the other size rails by themselves without the heads and flip stops. That way you have all the rails in 1 set of heads and flip stops like I have with my set. Then you just flip these out whenever you want to change the size of the tracks as needed. Now you may have seen me talk about this tool before. This is the Amana tool. And this is an adjustable countersink bit with a non-marring stop so you can get repeatable countersink holes for screws. And as I've said before, this thing is pretty awesome, but it does have a few issues. And Jonathan and his team over at KM Tools, they've created a design of their own that addresses some of the biggest flaws that I have with the Amana tool. Now, this is the Katz Moses toolless countersink. So how is this better than the Amana tool? Well, first off, it's in the name. This is a toolless countersink. You see, the Amana tool and many of its copies require an Allen wrench to be able to make adjustments to the depth stop of the countersink. And this can be kind of fiddly and very imprecise. It's really hard to hold it in the exact spot that you want while you're trying to tighten up the screw. Now they solved this issue with a really genius idea. There's this little magnetic locking ring that's used to make the adjustments. You just pull out on this little ring and the tool spins on a threaded shaft, and that's what moves the countersink in and out. And when you snap the ring back into place, the tool is locked at that setting. It's not going to move. Now the really neat thing about using a threaded shaft for the adjustment on the countersink is that you can calculate exactly how much depth you'd have per revolution. And of course, Jonathan and his team have already made up a chart that allows you to set the bit for the screw size that you're using. With that, you can quickly go from one screw size to another just using the chart to set the depth without a whole lot of trial and error in trying to find the right setting. Now the bit and the countersink are easily replaceable. This is so you can swap easily between different sizes for different size screws, or if you happen to break one, you can easily put in another one. And you can get your replacement set over at kmtools.com. And the smaller profile makes this bit a lot easier to get into tight spaces in corners or inside cabinetry. It's also able to balance much better on small, narrow boards where the Amana bit doesn't do so well. Now, the second thing about this new design that I really like, and probably my favorite improvement over the Amana tool, is the weight. This is like half the weight of the Amana tool. And you may not think that that makes a lot of difference. And I don't know, for one or two pilot holes, maybe it doesn't. But if you're building a large piece of furniture or doing a bunch of cabinets, you could be drilling dozens or even hundreds of countersunk pilot holes. And I can tell you that extra weight on the end of the drill is going to make a big difference very fast. So this has definitely earned a place in my shop as my new favorite countersink tool. How many times have you ever needed to make a small adjustment to your table saw fence and done that old tappity tap tap method to try to get the fence moved just that tiny little bit? But then after a couple of taps, you don't know how much the fence has moved or even if it moved at all. Well, this next tool makes those micro adjustments fast, easy, and most importantly, extremely accurate. Now, this is the T-Fence Micro Mag Adjuster by Canyon Fire Tools. Now this works by attaching to your table saw T-fence with a powerful embedded magnet. The other side has a slot for a 95-pound mag switch magnet that locks to the fence rail. Now with the mag switch turned off, the tool moves easily back and forth on the fence and is out of the way for normal cutting. When you need to make an adjustment, you engage the magnet and unlock the fence. Now you can easily move the adjustment with the thumb wheel in either direction. No more tap, tap, tap trying to guess at how much you've moved the fence. Now, the downside to many useful gadgets like this is really just remembering that you even have it to begin with. But the great thing about this is once it's set to the fence, it can just hang out here on the table saw fence. With the mag switch turned off, it just slides back and forth along the fence and it's completely out of the way and it's always here and ready to go whenever I do need it. But once the magnet is engaged, it is incredibly strong. There's 50 pounds sitting on my table saw fence. This thing still moves easily. Okay, it can handle 50 pounds. Let's try and see how far this thing can actually go. All right, there's 70. Yeah, no problem at all. Still good. Okay, we're getting just a little bit of slippage every once in a while at 90. All right, and as you can see, it's still moving it, but yeah, right there, we're getting a little bit of slippage on the magnet on the fence. But when are you ever going to have that much weight on your fence? Now, I know some of you are asking, well, what if I don't have a steel rail or fence that a magnet will stick to? Well, they sell these little things called iron chips that have industrial tape on the back side of them. And you can use those to attach to wood, plastic, aluminum, whatever other tool you have. And you can use the micro adjuster there as well. And for even more versatility, I've got this adapter from Inspire Woodcraft that I can use the micro adjuster on my router table using the fence slot. But it doesn't stop there. You can add a micro adjustment to a lot of other tools, just like your bandsaw as well. This is an awesome tool that gives you just a whole new level of accuracy on many of your tools. So be sure to check out Canyon Fire Tools and order one for your shop. A good handheld trim router is something I would say is pretty much an essential tool for almost any woodworking shop. They're used for so many tasks like cutting grooves and rabbets, flush trimming, creating edge profiles, and even doing joinery. But the biggest issue that I have with the trim router is they make just an awful mess. And that's because most trim routers just don't have any type of dust collection. They throw the chips and dust all over the shop, and I end up spending more time cleaning up afterwards than I did actually using the tool. But a buddy of mine, Drew, he came up with a simple solution, an acrylic trim router base with a dust collection shroud that actually works. Now, he calls it the Trim Router Base 1000 Pro because putting 1000 on anything always sounds better. Just check out this and see how much dust is flying around without any shroud in place. Now look at the difference with the shroud on. Now, for something so simple, it's hard to believe how well this actually works. I mean, there's virtually zero dust that I could see coming out when I have this shroud in place. Now, I do want to give a little bit of a word of warning. This is not quite universal, so if you're using like a standard shop vac hose, it does not connect to this. I tried, doesn't work. If you have the Festool type dust collection hoses, those fit perfectly. If you have the Rockler, I believe it's Dust Right hoses, I tested those work perfectly. So just make sure that you have the right hose to be able to connect to this so you don't get it and be upset that it doesn't actually fit. Now, if you need to take this shroud off to say change the bit or something, it's actually designed to be done without any tools at all. You just loosen up these screws with your fingers and it can come right off. Now, right about here is where I would typically drop one of these screws and they would suddenly disappear into some alternate universe, never to be seen again. But Drew solved this by making the screws actually captured within the housing itself so they can't fall out, so you'll never lose them. Now, when Drew released the video on his channel announcing this trim router kit, I knew that I wanted one. It just looked like it really solved a problem that I was frustrated with. So I sent him a message to ask about him, and you know what? Drew was such a nice guy that he sent me the link to his website where I could go and buy one. I'll post it down in the video description if you'd like to see it yourself. Speaking of new tools and upgrades, I want to tell you about a new change that we've made outside of the shop. Our dog Gene is a shelter rescue that we welcomed into our home about 10 years ago. But recently I noticed Gene wasn't doing so well. He's been going entire days without eating his food, so he's lost weight, started having some health issues, including losing a lot of his energy. So after talking with Gene's vet, he recommended a change in his diet. I did some research looking for an alternative from the highly processed kibble that Gene's been eating for years, and I came across the Farmer's Dog. Farmer's Dog makes freshly prepared, human-grade dog food. It's cooked with the same safety standards as our own food, and their recipes are created by board-certified veterinary nutritionalists. When I signed up, I answered a series of questions on Gene's age, his weight, his eating habits, so they could provide a tailor-made plan to fit his needs. Food arrives pre-portioned just for him, which makes it easy to help maintain a healthy weight. Gene is currently following the transition guide that was included in his first box of food, which is really important as he moves off of the dry kibble into his new fresh food. And honestly, he's enjoying his new food a lot better now. And a special thanks to the Farmer's Dog for sponsoring today's video. They're offering 50% off on your first box of freshly made, healthy dog food. Plus you get free shipping and 24/7 customer support if you need it. Just click on the link in the description or scan the QR code to get started. Using hand tools are one of the most enjoyable and satisfying tasks in woodworking. Now, whether it's getting those thin, wispy shavings from a smoothing plane or a perfectly fitting dovetail joint. However, one of the main reasons that a lot of beginners don't use hand tools more often is they struggle with the sharpening process to keep those tools slicing through the wood. And there are a lot of sharpening jigs on the market that all claim to get razor sharp results every time, but they almost never live up to that hype. Take this premium jig from Veritas. This is probably one of the most well-known sharpening jigs on the market for woodworkers. And I've used this for a number of years, and while it can get a blade very sharp, it does have some of its flaws. The main issue I run into is my blades almost always end up being out of square, and that's because this jig just does a terrible job of holding the blade secure enough to keep it from moving around. The slightest little bump and the blade just goes out of square and you're sharpening at an angle. It also can be a bit of a pain to set up. To set the sharpening angle, you have to slide on this extra attachment to the jig and set the blade, and then try to slide this back off without bumping the blade out of position or cutting your hand. So I recently got my hands on the Katz Moses Universal Sharpening Jig, and I have to say the folks over at KM Tools have really nailed it with this. It's so easy to use. I don't feel like I need an instruction manual every time I use it like I do trying to figure out this Veritas jig. So instead of having this extra attachment or a jig that you make yourself to set the angles, this has the main angles of 25 and 30 degrees built right into the main body of the jig itself. So you can very quickly get to those primary angles. Now, if you do want to go beyond just the 25 or 30 degrees for your angle and add a micro bevel, there is a little clip-on piece that goes right on the fence, clips right into place, and now you can set a micro bevel anywhere from 20 to 35 degrees. It clips right on and off, and you don't have to worry about bumping the blade or cutting your hand trying to get it on or off and get it out of the way. Now, they solved the biggest issue I have with the Veritas jig, which is the blade easily sliding around and getting out of alignment. But with this jig, I know my blade is square because it registers against this removable magnetic fence. Now you can set this for a perfect 90 degrees for your planes or your chisels. It's also able to be set to 35 or 40 degrees if you're sharpening skewed chisels or blades. Now, in most other jigs, you either can't sharpen skewed blades at all, or you're required to buy a second, more expensive attachment to be able to sharpen skewed blades. So having that built in and completely included is a real bonus. And with this jig, I'm spending a lot less time messing around with my sharpening setup. I can quickly get a razor sharp edge and just get back to woodworking instead of spending all of my time sharpening my blades. Now, if you've been around woodworking the last few years, I'm sure you've seen at least some variation of these round little pucks commonly called bench cookies. The idea behind these was to replace the painter's pyramids that would leave the little divots in the back of your project. Now, these bench cookies go beneath a board to lift it up off your workbench so it doesn't get all scratched up whenever you're routing or sanding. It's also meant to provide some grip to keep the board from moving around. Now, the bench cookie was a huge improvement, but it has some flaws of its own. For one, they're a little bit too small and don't provide enough grip. A lot of times when I'm sanding a part or doing some routing, I still see the board sliding around and I keep having to stop and reposition the board on the cookies. Now, I've been just dealing with these frustrations until earlier this year, Carbon Method came out with something that they're calling bench nuts. Now, these bench nuts are made from a dense closed cell foam. They are rigid enough to provide pretty good stability and support, but they won't dent your project. You can use these for sanding, routing, assembly, and finishing to keep your project from moving around as you're working on it. And when you're doing a glue up, don't worry if you get a little bit of glue on them. The closed cell foam actually doesn't absorb glue, so it just peels right off. Check this out. You just let the glue dry and it just peels right off. Now be sure to check the link in the description to grab a set of these nuts for your shop. Oh, come on, you knew that joke was coming. All right, now Tell me if this sounds familiar. You've spent hours milling up your lumber perfectly flat. The edges are jointed, you've got the grain matched just the way you like it for a beautiful tabletop. Everything's ready for the glue up. And then, absolute chaos. The moment the clamps pull the glue joint together, the board starts sliding around in the glue. You're scrambling, trying to get clamps on everything before all the boards shift out of alignment. Grab every clamp in your shop, some trying to pull the boards together and others desperately trying to keep the faces flush. But now the panels start to bow from all the clamping pressure, and you're in a race against time, fighting to get everything in position before the glue starts to set. And even when you manage to get all the clamps in place, you still end up with ridges from misaligned joints. And you end up spending the next hour planing and sanding the panel flat. But it doesn't have to be like this. What if you could have one clamp that pulls the joints together while at the same time keeping the faces flush and aligned? Well, that's exactly what these panel clamps from Rockler are designed to do. You see, these clamps sandwich the boards between two rigid steel cawls that force the joints flush as you tighten the clamp. So all of those ridges from misaligned joints are totally gone. Now, unlike parallel and pipe clamps, these panel clamps won't cause your panel to bow when you put a lot of pressure under it. And the sawtooth design makes it quick and easy to make adjustments to the size depending on the width of the panel that you're working on. Now these clamps can handle panels up to 36 inches wide and 3 inches thick. And there's also a mini version that is great for doing cutting boards, serving trays, and even frame and panel doors. And yes, these do cost more than just pipe clamps or even parallel clamps, but by the time you factor in the stress and the time savings and just having to use 2 clamps instead of multiples, these are more than worthwhile in my book. Now, I know buying new tools for your shop can get really expensive, but it doesn't have to be. So if you want to save some cash, check out this video over here where I show you 15 of my favorite tools that you can get for under $20. I'll see you there.